Great. Awesome. So thanks again to all the volunteers and the cooks and all that. A lot of effort went into planning all that. So thanks to Tim for his help really spearheading that. All right. So afternoon, we have 2 sessions. We're going to have Q&A at the end. Juan will be up here next to start us off. So one thing I'd like to mention, we have tons of extra food. So we're going to have that set up in the lobby. Feel free to take anything that's there. You're doing us a favor if you do that. So by all means, please, please take some. Tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, Carl and Juan will be back with us speaking at our 9 and 11 services. So Juan will be kicking us off at our 9 o'clock service. Carl will be teaching at our 11 o'clock service. So stick around, different speakers at both messages. I'm sure it'll be a great blessing. All right, so let's pray, prepare our hearts for this afternoon's sessions. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the food that you blessed us with and the hands that prepared it, Lord. I pray that you just settle our minds with all the cares and concerns of this world, Lord. I pray that you can just settle our hearts, give us ears to hear, give us hearts and minds to understand what Juan and later Carl have for us this afternoon, Lord. I pray that it's a blessing. I pray that you anoint their words, Lord. I pray that you can speak through them, that it's not them speaking in their own power, that it's your power filling Juan and Carl to just bless us with what they have in store for us, Lord. And I pray these things in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Principles of critical thinking. So this is a lecture that shows you the importance of critical thinking and how to apply it in our real everyday lives. This is actually out of chapter 2 in the book titled How to Think that we have outside. And I think these skills are so relevant and so important to us today. One of the reasons why I believe we need to have these critical thinking skills is because we are surrounded with fake news. And I'm not speaking politics here. I'm speaking about the enemy lies to us in a gazillion ways, and he's super clever at it. And the lies are disguised as truth, and we need to be able to discern the difference between what is actually true and what is not. When you listen to the news, you'll listen to conflicting stories in the same newscast that are contradictory. And you know that both of them can't be true because they contradict each other. So what do you believe? What do you believe? It's incredible. The society we live in has so much information available to us that what people fail to notice is that a lot of times this information is conflicting information. You get one study comes out and tells you that scientists have observed and studied that eating chocolate is good for your heart. And then in the very next news story, there's a story about how bad chocolate is for your heart. And you're like, okay, so what do I do with this? Is it good or is it bad? Well, one story tells you that bananas are the worst thing you can eat for your diet, and the next story tells you all the incredible benefits of eating bananas for your diet. What do you do with that? That's the world we live in. We are constantly being bombarded with conflicting truth claims, and we need to be able to think critically and evaluate them. Too many people in the world today will embrace anything without questioning it, as long as the presenter seems believable. We live in a gullible world. We are very vulnerable. If somebody that we think is believable says something, we automatically take it as truth without really evaluating it. Should we as Christians be doing that? No, absolutely not. We need to be the Bereans. We need to be the ones that everything we hear, we take it to the Word of God and see if it's true or not. Even if it's Paul that's speaking to you, even if it's your pastor, even if it's me, it doesn't matter who speaks to you. Our job as Christians is to take whatever is being said to us to the Word of God and make sure that what we're being told is what the Word of God teaches. And so we are supposed to not be vulnerable. We're not supposed to be those young people that are tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine that comes flying around. We should not be persuaded by the lies of people so easily. And sometimes we are just blown away by how easily and how quickly somebody can be persuaded to abandon the truth. It's incredible. It's incredible how fast it happens. And history is sad. When you look at history, far too many people embraced ideas without considering the consequences of those ideas. And they read Marx, and they read Stalin, and they read Hitler, and they read Pol Pot, and they saw Fidel, and they bought into the lies that were being told them because they did not critically evaluate what was being said. And millions upon millions of people have died. The 20th century was probably the bloodiest century in human history. And the blood flowed as a consequence of bad ideas, bad ideology embraced by the masses. We gotta be better than that. But you know what? It's not a new problem. For us, it's not a new problem. This is precisely what Paul was warning the church of the Colossians about. And so it's the same verse we saw in the first talk. This is the warning. You gotta be careful, beware, watch out, look out, heads up. Because people are gonna try to cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit. All of it based on human traditions and not on Christ. All of it based on the principles of this world and not on Christ. In other words, be careful, because unless something is founded upon truth, upon Christ, upon His word, you gotta be skeptical about it. You have to question it. Paul said to the Ephesian church that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine. By what? The trickery of men in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. Think about that for a minute. What is Paul telling the church at Ephesus? Look, there's people out there that are crafty, they're cunning, they're brilliant at deceiving, and they plot and scheme to deceive you. That's what is happening all around us, and we need to be critical thinkers. I was sharing with someone during the lunch break that it's the agenda of our educational system is plotting and deceiving and using cunning and craftiness to get young people to abandon their faith. It's the agenda. Because our educational system, and I'm an educator, and I can tell you this with property, and I can back it up. Our educational system believes openly, this is not even a secret. They openly believe that the first priority of educators, especially in higher education, colleges, universities, graduate schools, the first priority has to be to cut the umbilical cord of young people and detach them from all the fables and myths and religious, fanatical ideas. Because that is keeping them from progressing. That's the agenda. So when our kids arrive on a college campus, they have no idea what they're stepping into. But there is a plot in place, there's a trap in place, they're walking into a trap. And the professors will go after them because they all have the same purpose. Yes, I'm going to teach you art, or I'm going to teach you history, or I'm going to teach you economics, but before I teach you anything, let's cut that cord that connects you to mythology and fables, because that's how they see Christianity and all religions. We got to cut you off of that superstition and get you to be focused on science and truth. And that's the agenda. And you'll have a student, I have so many students over the years that have written back to me and confirmed and giving me examples of this. For example, FIU, Florida International University, which is in my neighborhood. I live in Miami, Florida. They have a tremendously successful engineering program. And so if you get into their engineering school, and if you're part of the honors college, which is an elite group of students, the top graded students, the top qualified students, you can be an engineering student in the honors college, and you have these special classes for honors students. And in those classes that you get together with all the honors students from the honors college, the first 6 weeks of school are entirely devoted to disconnecting you from your faith. Week 1, problems with the Bible. Week 2, problems with God's existence. Week 3, they'll bring in a very radical feminist that'll tell you that the Bible is, God hates women and the Bible is against women. So if you're a woman, you don't want to be believing anything the Bible says. Week 4, they'll bring somebody from the LGBT community to tell you that the Bible is against, all gender ideas and freedom, and the Bible is old school, old-fashioned, repressive, and so 6 weeks of this, bang, bang, bang. What's the point of, they gotta cut that cord, they gotta disconnect you. That's why they're so successful. And 80% of the kids, they are able to persuade to cut the cord and just forget about that. That's why critical thinking is so important. Because we need to teach our kids, and we need to know ourselves when we're walking into a trap, how to respond, how to react, how to know what you're being told, and how to have an answer for what you're being told. And some of these kids would write to me and say, look, the professor said this today. Well, how do I respond? What do I do? Okay, here's how you respond. Here's what you do. Here's what you say. But we need to be able to learn how to think and do this for ourselves. Now, what is critical thinking? Let's get some definitions in here first. First of all, don't get confused with the word critical. Critical means to be negatively judgmental, fault-finding. When somebody is too critical or something, you're like, they're not people you want to be around. But that's not what we're talking about. When we're talking about critical thinking, it's about using all of our faculties, all of our mind, in order to evaluate ideas and figure out if they are true or false. That's what critical thinking is. It's using your all the skills and all the tools in your chest to evaluate an idea to figure out, is this true or not? Is this a trustworthy source or not? Is this reliable information or not? And I'm going to show you 6 principles that really help you do this and do so effectively. But before we get there, you got to understand that there's at least four benefits to critical thinking. 4 areas that are going to be really benefited when we engage in thinking critically. First of all, we get the skills we need to evaluate arguments. Okay? Look at this silly argument. All cats have 4 legs. I have 4 legs. Therefore, I am a cat. We know that's silly. We know that's wrong. But why is it wrong? Where's the problem with that logic? Is it true that all cats have 4 legs? Yes, unless they've been hit by a car or mutilated somehow, but most cats have 4 legs, naturally. Is it true that this dog has 4 legs? Yes, absolutely. So why isn't he a cat? Critical thinking will teach you what the problem is with that argument. It's category confusion. What can you conclude from the fact that cats have 4 legs and dogs have 4 legs? The only thing you can conclude from that is that cats and dogs are of the 4-legged kind. There's categories here. The category of 4-legged creatures includes dogs, cats, cows, horses, and a bunch of other stuff. That's a category. Now, in that category of 4-legged things, animals, you have cats for sure. And you also have dogs for sure. But you can't say that dogs are equal to cats. They're not. Now, this is so obvious, but you know what happens? What happens when this is used and the words are replaced with philosophical ideas, theological ideas, and then all of a sudden it's not so clear to us whether it's right or not. It's not so clear to us what the problem is. And I'll show you one. We're going to do one that looks just like this when we get into the premises, but one that has apologetic significance. Another incredible benefit is that you get the skills required to overcome your own personal prejudices and biases. When you're a critical thinker, you're going to evaluate your own ideas. And that is so helpful because sometimes we don't realize how biased we are about something. And we're wrong, but we're so biased that we don't see it. Well, when you're a critical thinker, you learn to question your own biases. You learn to question your own conclusions and your own ideas and think more clearly about what you believe. And sometimes we find that we have contradictory beliefs in our system. And it's like, wait a minute, how can I hold these two things as true when they are both contradictory? One of them might be true, but both of them cannot be. That's what critical thinking does. It gives you those skills. It also gives you the skills required to make good arguments. When you're going to present the gospel, when you're going to respond, as Peter says, and give an answer for anyone who demands a reason for the hope that is within you, you have to have a good argument. Because too many times we as Christians present fallacious arguments. And when you present an argument that's fallacious, that's erroneous, that's a bad logical argument, you're hurting the cause. Because the critical thinker on the other side is going to think you're an idiot. He's going to think you're dumb. And he's not going to believe anything else you have to say. It's like the Christians say, well, I don't believe in evolution because why aren't monkeys turning into people anymore? Bad argument. Don't use that. That's not what evolution teaches. And when you say that, the person who understands evolution says, wow, where did this guy come from? I wonder what planet he's from. Don't use bad arguments. Critical thinking shows you how to make good arguments. The kind of arguments that people have to really grapple with. The kind of arguments that say, okay, wait a minute, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Wherever there's design, there has to be a designer. And the universe has incredible design, so there has to be a designer of the universe. Let's talk about it. That's a strong argument because you've learned how to prepare good arguments. Critical thinking really helps you in strengthening your game, your approach, your argument. And finally, it gives you incredible abilities to make good, intelligent decisions about what to do with your life and where to go and decisions you have to make. In everyday life, when you make hard decisions, critical thinking helps you to really discern what's a better decision than another decision. And some of you have done this for years and you didn't even know you were thinking critically. But you come up with a list of pros and cons and then you evaluate them, and that is thinking clearly and critically about making decisions. So these are the kind of skills you're going to get when you do critical thinking. Now, what is the ultimate goal of critical thinking? Finding truth. That is the ultimate goal of critical thinking, finding truth. People seem totally out of touch with reality. As I showed you in the previous talk that we did, people are disconnected from reality altogether. When somebody can stand up there and say that, well, Hitler was entitled to do what he did, that person is disconnected from reality. Reality and what is going on in their head are two different spheres, two different, areas completely. Truth seems to elude many people. People adopt relativism. People say there's no truth with a capital T. Everyone has their own truth. Now, mind you, we all have our own beliefs about things. That's true. You might believe something and I might not believe it. That's okay. But we don't have our own truth. Truth is truth, independently of us. And we either believe it or we don't. We accept it or we don't. But whether we believe it or not, it's still true. Or it's still not true. That's the nature of objective truth. And we saw that already in our previous talk. We need the critical thinking urgently, because we need to find truth. We need to have truth to be able to give it back to people, to be able to share it with others. And we have an amazing Debunked on Truth. And I want to show it to you. And we all include these debunked videos because we want you to see what a tool this is that you can use on your phone, on your tablet, and show it to somebody when you're having a conversation. And then discuss it. It's a great conversation starter. Here we go. Watch this Debunked on Truth.
A telling thing happened a while back when Jesus was standing in front of Pontius Pilate. It's right here in the Bible, John 18:36. Jesus says to him, "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Now, Pilate says this. Wait for it. He says, "What is truth. Shabam! There it is, the big kahuna, the spicy enchilada, the fizzy lifting drink, the question of the ages. And it's not much different today, which is why you hear claims like it's true for you, but not for me, or there is no truth, or truth is relative, bro, or the ever so popular speak your truth. Now, these things all sound nice and sweetie sweet, but what in the world do they mean? Well, let's take it's true for you, but not for me. Now, in all honesty, doesn't the person who says this to you want you to believe what he's saying? He's assuming that his relativistic claim is universally true, right? Everything is relative, I guess, except his relativism. Now, if something can only be true for me, which it can't, then it doesn't apply to you or anyone else, so what's the point in saying it? But if it is true for everyone, then the claim is wrong, because it's only claiming to be true for me and not for you. Get it? Okay, maybe it's not clear right this second, but things that contradict themselves, like this claim, cannot be true. What about the claim there is no truth? Oh, yet another statement that demolishes itself by its own standard. After all, is that claim true? If so, it's wrong. If the claim is not true, then it's true that the statement there is no truth is not true, which means there is truth, which makes the claim false. Moving on to the popular speak your truth. I gotta ask you in all seriousness, is there really your truth and my truth? Truth is what is. It corresponds to reality. It's black and white, either or, fact kind of stuff, right? Tiny Tammy tossed the toy pterodactyl tenderly into the Thames that Tuesday, or she didn't. It's pretty simple, really. Truth is truth, and it doesn't change with a pronoun. Now, you might disagree and throw your hands up in objection, that is, until, of course, you are on the receiving end of a lie, somebody else's truth that contradicts reality. Let's say you deposited $100 into the bank yesterday, but the banker's truth is that you didn't. Your sweet hundo, gone.
Oh no.
Let's say you got every answer on every test right, but the teacher's truth is that you flunked the whole grade. Now you have to repeat it. Your summer, gone. See, I think you get it. And I think you'd be fighting pretty hard for the truth, the thing that corresponds to reality in those specific scenarios, because lies, other people's truths that aren't true, have huge consequences. Relativism is not only flawed, it's unlivable and unsustainable. And let's be honest, nobody wants a relative answer when they ask a real question, especially if it's directions to a gas station when you have to go to the bathroom. But wait a second, what if I say, my favorite candy is M&M's, and you say your favorite candy is Snickers? See, what's true for me is not true for you in that sense, right? Well, actually, wrong. See, I'm saying it's true that my favorite candy is M&M's, and you are saying it's true that your favorite candy is Snickers. We're simply stating the truth about our preferences. Now, you gotta watch out for preferences, beliefs, and opinions trying to sneak their way into Truth's exclusive club. After all, you can prefer that you have a blue hat when you only have a white one, but it doesn't change the facts. You can believe the moon is made out of cheese, but it doesn't make it true. And it might be your opinion that 5 plus 5 is actually 13, but you'd be wrong. See, tricky word games don't change the truth. They get you nowhere. As Double Dubs would say, you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. But what about morality? Ah, that's the big one. One person thinks it's wrong to commit adultery, and another thinks it's not. So the one might say, I'm glad you have your truth, baby, but it doesn't work for me. First of all, what you think about the truth doesn't change it. A thing is either true or not, even moral duties and obligations. Second, truth is not dependent on the subject, that is, you or me. It's objective. So whether it works for us or not doesn't change what's actually true. Third, since these two claims are in direct opposition to one another, only one can be true. This is the irrefutable, unstoppable, unbreakable, incontrovertible law of non-contradiction, smashing through the nonsensical, irrational, and weak wall of hocus-pocus relativism. And, curiously, here we are today right where Pilate was, having to deal with the one who calls himself the way, the truth, and the life, claiming that no one gets to the Father, that is God, except through him. That's either true or it's not. And we can either deal with it head on, or we can, like Pilate and like Romans declares, suppress the truth and unrighteousness, which leads us to make claims like, what's true for you is not for me. Truth is relative. There is no truth, etc., all of which heretofore have been debunked. Adios.
Okay. That's the scoop on truth, okay, in a very fast pace. Now, let's get right into the critical thinking principles. Here are 6 critical thinking principles, and I'm going to go through each one with examples. First of all, seek clarity in discourse. Number 2, strive for accuracy. Number 3, pursue precision. Number 4, demand consistency. Number 5, insist that arguments make logical sense. And number 6, keep the discourse relevant. These 6 principles will go a long way in avoiding errors and lies and falling into traps when we know how to apply them. So let's jump right in with the first one. What does it mean to seek clarity in discourse? Well, you cannot evaluate an idea that you don't understand. You cannot. And sometimes people present things in such a way that is very hard to understand, and we jump at it without really having a full grasp of what is being said. And that is not good critical thinking. Good critical thinking wants to clarify what is being said before we engage with it. You cannot engage with something that you do not understand. I have a great example here of something that is really not very clear. And this is from my buddy, Soren Kierkegaard. If you've read a little philosophy, you know that Soren is a really difficult dude to read. I can't even imagine being the translator that translated this to English, because this is brutal. This is the opening paragraph of a book called The Sickness Unto Death. If you've ever written anything, you know that you have to have a hook at the beginning, or else people are not going to continue reading. You got to capture people's attention from that first sentence in what you're writing. That's good writing skills. Apparently, Soren didn't care if anybody read his book. Apparently not. Oh my goodness, this is a textbook example of what not to do and how not to write, and yet he was brilliant. Okay? So, seeking clarity in discourse. Let's see, if you were to have to evaluate this idea and tell me if it's right or wrong, if it's true or false, how well would you do? Let me help you out here. Here we go. A human being is a spirit. But what is a spirit? A spirit is the self. What is the self? The self is a relation that relates itself to itself, or it's the relation relating itself to itself in the relation. The self is not the relation, but it is the relations relating itself to itself. A human being is a synthesis of the infinite and the finite, of the temporal and the eternal, the freedom and the necessary. In short, a synthesis. A synthesis is a relation between two. Consider in this way, a human being is still not a self. In the relation between the two, the relation is the third as a negative unity, and the two relate to the relation and its relation to the relation. Thus, under the qualification of the physical, the relation between the physical and the physical is a relation. If, however, the relation relates to itself to itself, the relation is a positive third, and this is the self. True or false? Who knows? Seriously, this is the kind of stuff that when somebody hits you with it, you're like, huh? I'm sorry, ask Carl about that one, man. I can't answer that one. You got to talk to Carl about that. You got to seek clarity in discourse. How do you do that? I'm going to teach you 3 questions to ask. Whenever somebody says something that you don't understand clearly, that you're not sure what they're saying, 3 key questions. First of all, what do you mean by that? Phenomenal question. Phenomenal question. You know what? Make it a habit to always seek clarity, even if you think you understand what is being said. When somebody says, well, I don't believe God exists. God does not exist. What do we tend to do? Respond, well, sure he does. Let me show you. No, hold on. Who made the claim? They made a claim. Who should defend it? They should defend it. You say God does not exist, then it's your job to show me why he doesn't exist. So how do I go about doing that? I'm not going to let you off the hook. You make a claim and I'm going to have to fight it? No. I will tell you what I think, but first let me get it out of you. So you don't believe God exists? What do you mean by that? It's a lot easier to say I don't believe God exists than it is to answer the question, what do I mean by that? Here's another great question. Why do you say that? In other words, what's behind that? What motivates you to say this? Here's another great one. How did you come to that conclusion? You gave me a conclusion. What are the supporting arguments? You gave me a tabletop. What are the legs that hold that table up? So you don't believe God exists? Well, how did you come to that conclusion? These are amazing questions. And a critical thinker starts here, because I want to hear as much as I can about what you think before I'm going to give you a response. Because that's going to assure me that I understand what you're saying, that we're not going to speak past each other because we're talking about different things, and that I'm going to be able to make you defend your position just as much as you want me to defend mine. This is called tactics. I highly recommend the book called Tactics by Greg Koukl. It's the best book you're ever going to read on how to engage with people in dialogue. People that are hostile, people that are steamrollers that want to run right over you and give you 50 questions at one time and don't let you answer any. This book tells you how to respond, how to deal. It's called Tactics. It's phenomenal. Greg Koukl is his last name, Koukl. I highly recommend that book. So these are questions to seek clarity. Always seek clarity before you respond. Second principle, strive for accuracy. Having inaccurate information usually leads to faulty conclusions. If you don't have accurate information, how could you have accurate answers, accurate conclusions? It's very hard. Think about math, okay? If you don't have the right numbers on the problem, you're not going to get the right answer. If you're not using the right formula or the right equation, you're not going to get the right answer. So you always have to seek clarity. And it's very common for people to rattle off unverified, erroneous information as if it were undisputable fact. People are really good at that when they're trying to make a point. I love it when people throw statistics at you, okay? And we've thrown several at you today. 55 to 88% of the people abandon their faith. I told you that as much as 80% of young people abandon their faith. But you know what? If you question me on it, I can show you where the statistics come from. I can show you the studies that have been done that lead to those statistics, and I can refer to you to books that show where these studies have been broken down and point by point. But a lot of times people don't do that. People shoot from the hip. And it's like, well, 90% of the people. Okay, hold on. 90%? What was the study that came up with that number? That's the look you get. Yeah, you just gave me a statistic. Like, what was the study? What was the study group? What was the question asked? How was it asked? Man, I'm really interested in this. Can you share that with me? Because people make it up on the spot, and you'd be surprised how many people make it up on the spot. But when you question it, it's like, okay, wait a minute. There's more to this. You mean you don't know where you got that from? Oh, okay. I mean, there goes your argument, right? Whether it's done purposely or not, the effect on the discussion is the same. It's meant to shut you up when somebody shoots these numbers at you. A critical thinker is always gonna question the accuracy of the facts that are presented in a discussion. My wife is really, women are automatically amazing, innate critical thinkers without ever studying it. So when they study it, they're even more dangerous. But my wife, oh my gosh, I've never won an argument with my wife, and I have a PhD in apologetics. She's just amazing, her thinking skills. I remember one time I had a really dumb idea. But you know what? I wanted to share it with her, and I wanted her to legitimize it or to at least give it a chance. So I packaged it for her. And I said, I was reading this morning and I read this really interesting fact. I didn't read anything. this is an idea I had. But if I back it up that I read it, then, she's going to have to at least give it some consideration. And no sooner had I said what I thought, she said, man, that's a dumb idea. Where did you read that? I give up. It's like critical thinking. Strive for accuracy, okay? Inaccuracies always make their ways into print. Please, the internet is completely inundated with articles, studies, discussions that are completely inaccurate. Just because something is on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Chances are it's not. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails we get in our ministry sharing with us amazing discoveries that have been circulating for years and they're not true. But they've come across your screen, you find it to be amazing, and you share it with everybody without fact checking. One of the most current ones circulating now is this giant skeleton that is dug up, and then you see the guy next to the giant skeleton. The guy is really small, and people circulate. They found the Nephilim. They found the giants from Genesis, and they circulate this picture. And every once in a while, at least once a month, I get somebody sending me that picture. Look, for your talks, they found this is amazing evidence. And it's not. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, critical thinker, and you see a logo and you look up the logo, it's a Photoshop contest. The logo of the Photoshop contest is on the picture. And when you go to that Photoshop contest, you're going to find that is a picture is a winner of a contest of Photoshop editing. It's not real, but people don't check it. Please understand, Microsoft doesn't send $1 to any charity for every email you send or contacts. That's not true. Marketers use that to collect emails to have good lists to then market their products. Nobody's going to give you $1 for it. They did not find hell under the earth in Siberia, and they did not record the screaming of hell. Even if you've heard a recording, it's not true. All kinds of crazy things circulate, and you need to be sure that what you are hearing is accurate. Many people will miss the fact that anybody can put up a website, anybody can write a blog, anybody can record a video, and nobody checks it for accuracy. Nobody. Numerous emails that circulate are just not true. So please be careful. Ask yourself if this is accurate, if this is true. How do we know? What's the backup? Let me give you an apologetics example of this. Here's a chart on whale evolution that appears in a museum on whale evolution in the University of Michigan. Okay? This is an actual sign from the museum. It shows all the steps from a land-dwelling creature all the way to the whale at the bottom. That is progressive evolution, and every one of them has a label, a name, a step. And you see that and you say, wow, look, it slowly became a whale. Now, if you're a critical thinker, you need to be asking yourself some questions. Those drawings are really nice. What's the evidence for those drawings? Let me see the actual bones that were found. Going to make all the difference in the world. And listen, this is everywhere. Let me show you a video from the Smithsonian Museum on whale evolution. This is right from the Smithsonian Museum. Watch this video.
Scientists now think that the earliest ancestor of whales was similar to this 50 million year old wolf-like mammal called Synonyx. Synonyx was a predatory scavenger that lived and hunted along the shores of an ancient sea. Perhaps its descendants found the water a source of abundant food and a haven from competition. Over millions of years, front legs became fins, rear legs disappeared, bodies lost fur, and took on their familiar streamlined shape.
Special sound effects just to highlight the magic. Seriously? And you think we have a problem like Carl says? I believe God created whales, and you believe that a land-dwelling earth creature like a wolf went back into the water and became a whale? And I'm the ignorant person? Seriously? So what about this chart? What about this chart? Okay? So every one of those has been discontinued in the argument. By the way, the chart is still there. Even though we now know that 4 of those have nothing to do with whale evolution, this chart is still in the museum. Why don't we take it down if we know it doesn't work? Because you know what? The idea is still true in their minds, even if the evidence is not. Let me show you why it's not true. Dr. Phil Gingrich, an expert on whale evolution, what does he say about the first one? He says the cat-like Synonyx or the hyena-like Pachyania will have to be put on a side branch. I doubt, he says, that they have any special relationship to whales. Okay, so it didn't start that way. Well, if it didn't start that way, the rest of the process is pretty dubious. Here's the next one. Maybe Ambulocetus is not the main line of, whale evolution. Okay. Maybe it's not in the main line. Why is it on the chart then? Next one. Well, I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had fluke tail. Rhodocetus doesn't have a kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers. Okay, so that one's eliminated. Well, what about this one? Well, Basilosaurus was not on the line of modern whales. It lived at the same time as modern whales, so it couldn't be a descendant of it. It lived at the same time as of. So what just happened to that chart? Completely debunked by the evidence. And they themselves debunk it, and it's still being taught. Here's a short little clip on just one aspect of whale evolution that makes it completely improbable that it ever happened this way. Just the change of tails from a wolf tail to a whale tail. Watch this.
All of these adaptations would have to be massive, including a remodel of the skull and muscles to move the nostrils to the top of the head.
These are all the changes.
The conversion of front legs into flippers. A reconstruction of the skeleton, including a ball joint that allowed the tail to move up and down. The transformation of a few dozen teeth into hundreds of plates lined with brush-like fibers. The reorganization of kidney tissues to accommodate the intake of salt water. Lungs dramatically enlarged and renovated to withstand the intense pressure of deep dives. The inclusion of a blubber layer for insulation in cold water. And modifications of ears, eyes, and skin to work effectively in an aquatic environment.
That's just some of the modifications that have to happen. Do we seriously think, and let's say, here's one that was not on there. Significant weight gain. That's a topic I know a lot about. How do you go from a 125-pound or 150-pound wolf-like creature to a 4,000-pound whale? I'm sorry. I couldn't gain that much weight if I tried. And I have tried. It doesn't work. This is just look, ask yourself, what is the actual information? Demand accuracy in what you're being told. Look at the evidence. Here's the third principle, pursue precision. Okay? Lack of precision has been very effective in the process of misdirecting and deceiving naive and unsuspecting people. There's an abundance of purposely imprecise words that make their way strategically into arguments. Words like many, most, a lot, almost, everybody, the majority should raise red flags in the minds of a critical thinker. How much is many? How much is a lot? When you say the majority of people, are you talking about the majority of 2 out of 3 people? Or are you talking about 50 million out of 60 million? Like, what's the pool size when you say the majority? Is it a majority of one, a simple one majority? I mean, come on. Let's be a little more precise. Let me show you this in the textbooks. This is phenomenal when you go to the textbooks, okay? Here's a 7th grade science, life science textbook about evolution. Paleontologists think that Archaeopteryx and today's birds descended from some kind of reptile, possibly from a dinosaur. Okay, so you see a picture of Archaeopteryx. It's a reptile descended from some kind of dinosaur. Birds descended from dinosaurs. Okay, let's pursue some precision here. What is actually being said? Paleontologists think that Archaeopteryx and today's bird descended from some kind of reptile, possibly from a dinosaur. What happens when you highlight the imprecise words? What is being said? Nothing concrete is being said. We think that maybe some kind of, and it could possibly be. Okay, then you're not giving me facts. You're giving me a very, very dubious opinion, okay? Here's Richard Dawkins, my favorite atheist, okay? It could be that sometime in some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved, probably by some kind of Darwinian means, probably to a very high level of technology, and designed the form of life that they seeded on perhaps this planet. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence of that. For that, if you look at the details of biochemistry and molecular biology, you might find a signature of some sort of designer. He's advocating here that life on Earth may have been seeded by aliens. Now, let's apply some critical thinking skills here, right? Let's look at all the imprecise words. It could be. What's the next one? Sometime earlier. The next one? Somewhere in the universe. Next? probably by some kind of Darwinian means, some kind of, probably, perhaps, suppose it's possible, you might find some sort. If you take out the imprecise words, what are you left with? Nothing. Nothing. A whole paragraph to say nothing. This is just thinking a little critically about what you read and how it's expressed. This could be so valuable. Because, okay, that could be your opinion, but as long as we all agree that that's just your opinion, we're okay. But when you say this as fact, something's wrong with this picture. This is not expressed as a fact. This is expressed as a very suspecting opinion. Pursue precision. It's quite common for someone to appeal to these vague terms to prove the acceptance of or accuracy of an idea being posted. Lack of precision is usually a sign of a weak argument. When you lack precision, you probably have a really weak argument that you're looking at. Number 4, demand consistency. Okay? Let's think about the relativism we talked about earlier, and let's talk about consistency here. Scenario 1. Lewis, the neighborhood moral relative, believes that everyone should be free to decide for themselves what's right and what is wrong, and nobody should force their moral views on other people. However, when Lewis's car was stolen by Jack, Lewis wanted Jack arrested and punished for stealing his car. Okay, that's not consistent here. We need to be consistent. If you believe that everybody's entitled to do what they think is right and you can't push your moral views on anybody, Lewis, when Jack stole your car, you have to acknowledge that that was his right thing to do. And you can't judge him for that. If you don't want to steal cars, don't steal cars. But you can't judge him for doing that. Isn't he entitled to do that? That's not very consistent, is it? Everybody's a moral relative until you touch their stuff. Then they become an absolutist, like right away. Throw him in jail. Stealing is wrong. Well, it might be wrong for you, but not for him. No, stealing is wrong. Okay, morally objective values, I agree. I'm glad you changed your mind. I'm glad you're no longer a moral relativist. Can't keep both. You can't keep both because they contradict each other. In this scenario, we have a contradiction. Saying one thing and believing another. If Lewis believes everyone decides for themselves right and wrong, then he has to accept Jack decided stealing cars was right for him. And it wouldn't be easy to understand why Jack would think that. It's easier to get a car that you don't have to pay for. Isn't that good? Wouldn't you like to have a car that you don't have to pay for? A nice new car, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, I don't know, whatever you like. And you don't have to pay for it. Furthermore, demanding that an arrest and punishment would be forcing his own morality on Jack, who obviously sees nothing wrong with stealing. Why do we have jails, by the way? Everybody in jail is there for doing what they thought was right, what they wanted to do, what they chose to do. So we shouldn't have anybody in jail. We should applaud their freedom to steal and to kill and to do everything else they do. Demand consistency, okay? Scenario 2, in a college fresh foreign language class, Philip was intimidated by the prospect of learning Chinese. The textbook was written entirely in Chinese, and then he met Mrs. Liang. The first thing she said when she walked into class was, "I don't speak a word of English." Except that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words in English. See, that's inconsistent. In scenario 2, we have a contradiction between what is said and what is done. It's called a practical inconsistency. You gotta be careful with inconsistency. People are very inconsistent with their views. They'll say one thing in one sentence, and in the very next sentence, they'll contradict themselves. You'll have somebody say, well, I reject binary, the binary system of gender. I reject it. I'm non-binary, meaning that I don't believe there's only 2 categories, male and female. I think that insisting on those social constructs is the worst thing that you can possibly do. That's why I have a right. If I want to transition from a male to a female, I have the right to do it. And I'm going to get the surgery, and you better be okay with it. Okay, stop and think for a minute. Okay, you don't believe that men and women are categories, but you're going to become a woman? How does that work? You see, your actions of becoming a woman while denying that womanhood is something is contradictory. People often contradict themselves. They're not consistent. You have to be careful in how you reason through these things. There's a lot of self-refuting statements like, you shouldn't force your morality on me. Okay, what are you doing right now? Are you not forcing your morality on me to tell me that I shouldn't force it on anybody else? How does that work? Well, it's wrong for you Christians to judge other people. And what are you doing right now? Aren't you judging me? So you're judging me to tell me that it's wrong to judge? How does that work? All religions are equally valid. Really? So Buddhism is atheistic. They don't believe there's a God. Christians believe there's a God. And we're equally valid? Like how either there's a God or there isn't a God. We both can't be right. You know, you gotta demand consistency. Number 5, insist that arguments make logical sense. To think logically is to reason correctly, to draw well-founded conclusions from the beliefs that we hold. To think critically, we need to be accurate, have accurate and well-supported beliefs. But just as important, we need to be able to reason from these beliefs to conclusions that logically follow from them. Unfortunately, illogical thinking is too common. Let me give you an illogical argument from Penn Jillette, very skeptical atheist that attacks Christians quite often in a very rude fashion. Trust me, to get a clip from him is very hard because the language is so foul throughout that it's hard to get a clip. But thankfully, in this argument, there was no foul language. I was really amazed. Okay, listen to his argument. This is why Noah's Ark story is fake. It's not true. He's going to give you the reason why. Listen to his argument.
The Noah thing is probably a mixture of stories about a flood.
Can we up the volume a little bit?
The Noah thing is probably a mixture of stories about a flood that really happened on the Euphrates River about 125 miles southeast of present-day Baghdad. Every spring, the Euphrates floods, but according to archaeologists, one June around 2900 BC, there was a 6-day storm and the river rose another 22 feet. The river overflowed the levees and a lot of people got killed. One of the survivors was a local Sumerian king named Ziusudra. He resourcefully commandeered a commercial barge loaded with merchandise and rode the flood downstream into the Persian Gulf, where he finally ran aground. Thankful to be alive, Ziusudra offered a sacrifice in a hilltop temple. That's it. Big flood, boat full of goods, happy landing on a hilltop. And we have geologic and archaeological evidence to support that. No surprise that at least 6 other cultures in the region had flood stories like Noah.
Okay. That's his argument. There was no global flood. Really? Okay. That's a sarcastic really. But really? Okay. Let's look at the logic. Premise 1. There was a local flood of the Euphrates River around 2900 BC. I have no issues with that. More than likely, that's true. I haven't checked, but I'm assuming that if I go to the history books, I'm going to find that to be true. And I don't have a problem with it. Second, a man survived that flood by commandeering a barge. I have no issues with that. It's probably true. I mean, we can fact check it and find that maybe it wasn't true, but it probably is. Now, what can you conclude from that? What can you conclude from the fact that there was a local flood of the Euphrates River and somebody survived in a barge? The only thing you can conclude from that is that there was a flood and somebody survived. Okay? What does he conclude? Noah's flood never happened. Like, how did you do that? That's really, he does magic on Vegas. This is a better magic trick than any of the other tricks he's ever done. Like, how do you introduce Noah's flood in this? Okay? Think about it for a minute. This is called in logic a non sequitur. It doesn't follow. Does the archaeological and geological evidence of one local flood mean that there were no other floods? Can the events of 2900 BC be the source for the regional flood stories? Especially since there was a flood stories that predate that day? Here's an additional problem. Does the existence of another flood account mean that the narrative in the Bible is a copy somehow? Of course not. So why are there flood stories in that whole region, in all the cultures? Well, because of the flood of the Euphrates River where a guy survived by commandeering a barge? No. How about because all the people that populated the world after that were descendants of Noah's family in the ark? Wouldn't they be describing this to future generations, something so catastrophic? It rained and the world was flooded for a year and we lived in an ark. Wouldn't you tell your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids about this? Wouldn't they tell their families? And then wouldn't they spread out after the Tower of Babel and hit the whole world with these ideas? Of course there's flood narratives all over the place because they're all populated by descendants of people that were at the flood. Now, over the years, these stories have varied from place to place. People have embellished the stories, they've changed it up, but there's a flood story. What you need to understand is that his argument doesn't make sense. He speaks about a local flood and a guy surviving and then concludes that this other flood never happened. You can't do that. You gotta demand that an argument make logical sense. What is illogical about the following arguments, okay? Bad things happen and evil exists, therefore God does not exist. Think about it. People use this all the time. Well, I don't believe in God. Why? Because all these bad things are happening. Now, what's the connection? You see, when you argue for the existence of evil, the existence of suffering, pain, I'm not going to argue with that. There is evil, there is pain, there is suffering. Absolutely. But how does that equate to non-existence of God? It doesn't. At worst, the most you can demand from this is that God is not a good God. You can argue that maybe God is not a good God because he allowed these things to happen. But his existence or inexistence is not challenged or even addressed by these arguments. What is addressed is God's moral character. What kind of a God allows this to happen? Okay, moral question about God's character. But to say that because there's evil, God does not exist, you can't make that leap. It doesn't follow. You gotta insist that arguments make logical sense. And number 6, keep the discourse relevant. A common tactic used by debaters in an attempt to distract the audience is to raise irrelevant issues. It's simply wandering from the subject, emphasizing some superfluous material to get you distracted and not focused on the actual argument. There's a lot of people that are really good at that, but few come close to the expertise in using this distractive, irrelevant arguments as Bill Nye, the science guy. Now, Carl showed a clip of this to the students the other day at the school, but I want you to see this because I want you to see what a red herring looks like. That's what we call it in logic. We call it a red herring. That's a fallacy. It's introducing something that has nothing to do with the issue, but it's a distraction. So you don't have to address the problems with the argument you're making. Here we go.
And I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world that's completely inconsistent with everything we observe in the universe, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them. We need scientifically literate voters and taxpayers for the future. We need people that can, we need engineers that can build stuff, solve problems.
Okay, let's talk about this. If you believe in creation and not in evolution, you're a dingbat. That's his argument. But please don't teach your kids that. Because if you teach them that God created the universe and everything in it, they're not going to be good engineers. Because we need educated voters and taxpayers. So if we believe in creation, we don't have to pay taxes? Man, I didn't get the memo. I got to go back to the IRS books and see if that's the case. You see what's happening here? It's a complete change of subject. We're not discussing the merits of creation or the merits of evolution or the problems with creation we're changing the subject here to, don't you want a future with top engineers and all these, come on. So don't teach them creation because we want them to be good engineers. Seriously? One of the top engineers in the world today, one of the top 5 engineers in the world today His name is Stuart Burgess, British. He's a young earth creationist. And he when I say he's one of the top engineers, this guy designed the robotic arms on the European space satellite, which is the biggest space satellite in existence. It's the size of a football stadium. He designed the robotic arms on that station that's out there in space. He's the engineer. And he not only does he believe in God and creation, he's a young earth creationist. You know, don't tell me you can't, please. Not only is it a bad argument where it doesn't follow principle number 5, it's got to make logical sense, but he's also changing the subject on it. The red herring fallacy is simple to refute. Just memorize this one-liner. You know that's true perhaps, but it's irrelevant. Maybe what you're saying might be true, but it's irrelevant. What our kids turn out to be is irrelevant. Why is creation wrong? That's what we need to be talking about. So please keep the discourse relevant. These are your 6 critical thinking principles that I highly recommend you do. This is just one chapter out of the book, but it's a very important chapter that you need to be familiar with. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. How to think, not what to think. That's what we need to be teaching our kids. And that's what we need to know ourselves. Thanks so much for listening. God bless you guys, and I'll hand it over to someone and we will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Great stuff. All right, let's take a break, everybody. We have a ton of Q&A questions, so want to make sure we get to all of them. So let's make this break quick, 5 minutes or so. We'll be right back in here, and Carl will give us our last talk, and then we'll be into Q&A after. Thanks.